Well, Daniel Levy is a former Israeli negotiator and president of the U.S. Middle East Project. He joins me now from London. A lot to unpack here, Daniel. So I've got a lot of questions. We'll try and see if we can get through them if the answers aren't too long. First of all, we know the Security Cabinet has recommended approval of this deal. What does that tell us about the position of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir?
Well, Sammy, we understand that Smotrich, the religious Zionism party, I think it's better to refer to the party names than the individuals perhaps, and Ben-Gvir, the Jewish Power Party, have opposed this. The difference between their positions is...
Sorry, Daniel, they essentially voted no, is the word I'm now getting in my ear, right? In this Security Cabinet meeting, those two voted no, but the Security Cabinet as a whole voted yes, but this is just the Security Cabinet. It's not the final approval, right?
Exactly, but there's a majority in the Security Cabinet, and there's a majority in the full Cabinet, and there's a majority in Parliament in favour of this. The issue for Netanyahu is that if he loses both of those factions, he no longer has a majority. However, they are not saying at this stage that they will bring down the government, and at this stage the opposition will offer a safety net. He, of course, doesn't want to be in that position. It's really interesting what they've said, if I can just mention that, Sammy. What one of the parties have said is, we'll go back into the government if you resume the war. The other party has said, we'll actually leave the government if you don't resume the war. Why that's interesting is because their goal, and this has been transparent throughout, is not some return to security or anything like that, or getting the perpetrators. Their goal is to resettle northern Gaza, to depopulate Gaza, to continue the Nakba of Palestinians. That's what is going on here.
Okay, hang on, Daniel, because you said a very interesting word there. What I want to understand is the following. Do we know if Netanyahu has given any assurances, any guarantees to the likes of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir that he'll restart the war and bail on this ceasefire after, for example, the first phase?
I do not think one needs to look for these hidden things, and nor am I sure they exist. The Likud response was to already offer a violation of this by saying that the agreement allows Israel to return to war. It categorically, unequivocally doesn't. But I think that what we have seen ever since it became clear that Netanyahu felt he's now dealing with an American president who's at least unpredictable, not a friend of Palestinians, but someone who may sometimes see a different American versus Israeli interest, Netanyahu has been in panic. He does not want this moment to come. He's scared of the dynamics that this could lead to, not only in terms of his coalition, but it really tells us that he hasn't achieved total victory and he wants to have a perpetual war. Now, Netanyahu, it's clear, is going to try and upend and not see through the full implementation. So he will continue provocations. It doesn't need secret deals to know that.
Okay.
But that's going to be his modus operandi.
Okay, so given what you've said in your analysis there, given that we should clarify, we're still waiting for the full cabinet to meet and give final approval for this deal. We still don't have that. This full cabinet meeting we thought was going to happen yesterday. Today, there was talk this morning that it might even be pushed till after Shabbat, late on Saturday. Now there's talk of it maybe happening in the next hour. While we're waiting for this, and you mentioned the U.S. position, we haven't heard from the Biden administration saying, you know, Israel has to approve this, that Netanyahu has to, you know, take a stand and not listen to the voices. In the same way that we've been hearing from Antony Blinken back in June, the rhetoric that Hamas has to approve this, they're holding this up. Let's just remind ourselves, Daniel, and listen to what Antony Blinken said in June.
And around the world, as well as international organizations, have all endorsed it. Israel has accepted it. And the only outlier in this moment, is Hamas. So my message to governments throughout the region, to people throughout the region is, if you want a ceasefire, press Hamas to say yes. If you want to alleviate the terrible suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, press Hamas to say yes. If you want to get all the hostages home, press Hamas to say yes.
Briefly, Daniel, because I want to get another one in, but is it now clear that what we were waiting for, because this is essentially the same deal, was actually Israel's approval, not the way that not what Antony Blinken was presenting to the world, that we were waiting for Hamas to approve it?
Sammy, you're pushing my buttons when mentioning Blinken. It was clear then and it was clear now. Blinken has lied and deceived everyone for months. That might be excusable if he did it in order to get a deal, but he did it in order, I don't know whether it was in the intention, but the effect was to scupper a deal. The Biden administration will have the blood on their hands of people for so long. Now, we are beyond that. It really doesn't matter what the Biden administration says or does now. What matters is whether it will be easy or not for Netanyahu to slip out of the implementation of this. He doesn't want to get to the final phase. He knows Hamas is still standing. The resilience is there. The Israeli troops have taken losses. His coalition is threatened. His perpetual war goal is threatened. He doesn't want to see this happen, but he is, I think, still able to sneak out of it, but at least he is not in an environment entirely of his own making.
Now, at the risk of pushing your buttons even further, along the lines of what you said there, looking at what the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, also a convicted terrorist, someone who is convicted of supporting terrorism, we should remind ourselves, what he's been talking about, he's tweeted on January the 14th, makes no attempt to hide this. And he said, over the past year, through our political power, we succeeded in preventing this deal from moving forward time and time again. However, since then, additional elements have been added to the government who now support the deal and no longer constitute a balancing act. Daniel, he's made it very clear that it was him and people taking his position within the cabinet that blocked this deal, and they're still there. Right? That puts a very big question mark over phase 2, phase 3, even if we get over phase 1. Yeah, so there's something has happened which is very unusual. Perhaps two things. There is a rare unanimity in Israel that Netanyahu is the one who has stood down, who is no longer blocking the deal, and that is because of the Trump factor. Another thing that's quite unusual is the extent to which you're seeing Israeli commentators acknowledging that this war has not gone well for Israel. Israel's paid a huge cost in international reputation, legal vulnerabilities, its economy, and on other fronts, and yet it's here. The difference, by the way, between Ben-Gvir and Blinken is that Ben-Gvir does not, in other instances, say, as Blinken does, I'm upholding international law. He didn't spend a year telling us something on Ukraine. He doesn't speak about genocide, as Blinken does in Sudan, while backing genocide somewhere else. But the key takeaway here, I think, Sammy, is that we can expect ongoing efforts, not just in Gaza, to goad, to try to provoke the unraveling of this deal. We'll, I'm sure, see ugly things going on in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, perhaps regionally, but also on other fronts. Let's also remember something like UNRWA. So if there's going to be the implementation of the ramping up of the so desperately needed humanitarian assistance, you can't do that without UNRWA. At the same time as this is going on, Israel is waging its despicable campaign against UNRWA. So if we want to see this through, we have to look at the multiple spaces in which those aggressions and provocations are going to take place, and how can they be blocked in each of those spaces. One of the reasons why this is such a fragile place to be. Thanks so much. Daniel Levy there. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for your analysis. Former Israeli negotiator.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.